We'd like to thank all our sponsors who's helping us out for some of the costs and promote this series of webinars through the NJTA. So I got some housekeeping here to do. We've oh, sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. We muted all your phones and your computers just so it's a lot easier for Dr. Clarke to present his topic. And we have a chat box that you can use to ask any questions. We're going to hold pretty much all the questions to the end, unless there's a really good question that comes up that might feather in to his discussion. So feel free to use that chat box whenever you want. Now, this is some housekeeping for the state of New Jersey and for Pennsylvania. We're offering pesticide credits today. There's a couple things that you have to do to get credits. You must be present for exams. We have 4 pop-up quizzes. Now, you don't need to answer them correctly. You just need to answer them. And then you also have to send a picture of you and your driver's license to CC, Executive Director at njturfgrass.org. This puts you with the webinar so that we can correlate that. That's just all stuff for New Jersey DEP. So you send that over now or by the end of the day. That would be great. All right, so without further ado, we've got Dr. Clarke here. I don't think I need to read the bio. I think anybody who's sitting here listening to me certainly knows who Dr. Bruce Clarke is. He's got an awesome presentation on how to develop fungicide programs effectively and economically. And Dr. Clarke, are you all set?
I am.
All right, well, let me give you power. Let me see if I can find it. I got 140 people here right now, so a second. There you go. All right, the show is yours, Doc.
Thank you very much, Jason. I really appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. And let me just cue up my slide tray here. Go back here. So, Jason, can you see that slide?
I cannot right now. I got my slides.
Yeah, Doc, we can see your slides.
Okay, just want to make sure. So, well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure for me. I want to thank the NJTA for giving me the opportunity to present this webinar. Like you, I miss seeing everybody. I really miss not attending and speaking at Expo. I was going to present this at Expo. So this is kind of a delayed Expo, and it's a great time of year to do it. There's snow on the ground in our area, and so you're not out taking care of your golf course. And hopefully you're open to some new ideas. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Be happy to answer any of the questions we get. This is a topic really that I was been asked a lot of questions about in the past. One of the typical questions I've gotten over the past 40 years working at Rutgers has been, what is the quote unquote Rutgers fungicide program for golf courses? And there really isn't a program. There is not one Rutgers program. We evaluate programs and have for years against a multitude of diseases. But really, developing a program is as much a science as an art. And so what I'm going to talk about today is my perspective on how to develop a fungicide program that not only is effective, but also is environmentally sound. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be talking about the strategy or the framework for which you should be thinking about when you're trying to develop a fungicide program. And if you follow this framework, you can develop an outstanding program that works really well, but also protects the environment. And the program that you may develop for here in New Jersey might be quite different than the fungicide program that we would develop for, say, South Carolina or Southern California, or for that matter, Beijing, China. And so really, it's a process, a thought process. I teach this process in the Rutgers 2-year professional golf school, and this is sort of something that I put together with thoughts of how I suggest people do it. And if you have some interesting comments, we can talk about maybe how you do it, how it may differ from what I'm suggesting. But this is a good framework, I think, for anybody, whether you're a novice or whether you've been in the industry for 30, 40 years. So first and foremost, if we talk about the process, the principles for developing an effective program, first and foremost, you have to talk about what are the major diseases on your golf course and when do they typically occur. And this could be different for a golf course down the street, might have different diseases that they're concerned with than what you're concerned with. But if you take a sheet of paper and just simply write down your major disease concerns on one side of the paper, and then we'll get to what the other side of that paper will be used for in just a moment. So first and foremost, identify your major diseases and when in the season they typically occur. Focus on best management practices. Avail yourself of the current research. There's been a tremendous amount of research out there in the past decade on best management practices for control of specific diseases. Major disease problems where I can think of best management practices being in place, really good ones would be anthracnose. Jim Murphy and I have developed, and our students have developed over the past 20 years, some really, I think, effective best management practices for control of that disease. Best management practices for dollar spot, we're working on that right now. We have best management practices for summer patch, gray leaf spot. And so if you have major disease problems, availing yourself of the current information on best management practices is really critical. And this can help you not only reduce the pathogen populations, the disease outbreaks you might otherwise get, but also reduce the potential for fungicide resistance, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on in the webinar. Third, developing a list of currently labeled products. Whenever I do any consulting outside of the state of New Jersey, I'll ask them, what products you have available to you. If you live in New York State, the product list is smaller than in, say, New Jersey. Same with California. Same with Quebec. If I go to a foreign country, especially Europe, their products that are available to them are extremely small. So, knowing the major diseases you have, following best management practices, and then listing your currently labeled products. And by the way, that would be on the right-hand side of that page. Diseases on the left side of the page and current labeled products on the right. Okay, select and apply the most efficacious fungicides not only at the optimum rates, but also the proper timing and proper water volumes. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of that. So you not only want the best product, but you want to be able to apply it in the most efficacious manner. Also looking at the strengths of each product. No product, I don't care how good the product is the best for every disease. And so even though a product might have 12 diseases on the label, it's going to be super strong on certain diseases and maybe okay on others, but know the strengths of each product and select broad spectrum fungicides or tank mix individual active ingredients when you're expecting more than one disease. If that's important, where your golf course is. And then finally, rotating chemistry, selecting fungicides with not only efficacy, but also with very low, what's called EIQ, or environmental impact quotient. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on. There are a number of different ways to evaluate the effect of your products on the environment. A very effective approach called environmental impact quotient was developed in Cornell a number of years ago. And that's one of the approaches that we use to evaluate the environmental health of a golf course in terms of products are being used, particularly fungicides. So this is sort of the principles I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to rotate through these, and then at the end sort of tie this in after we develop a good program, sort of evaluating how to evaluate that program with some of the current tools we have available like EIQ. So let's get started then. If we identify major diseases, you want to know not only what your major diseases are, but when they occur. Every course has a history of diseases. If you're a brand new superintendent on a course, look back on your previous records, see what that superintendent was spraying for prior to you. Finding out what the major diseases are, when they occur, and in what part of the course they occur can help you tailor your program to not only your golf course, but to specific parts of your course. Knowing this, what season the diseases typically occur, And, do you have hot spots? I mean, everybody has some hot spots, certain greens, teas, or fairways. And so generally my recommendation is developing a fungicide program for your entire course, a general program, and then tweaking that program if need be to control the disease in certain hot spots. That's different approach than just spraying wall to wall for keep disease in check throughout your entire course. What I'm suggesting is generating a general base program, fungicide program, and then tweaking that where need be to keep the hot spots in check. And it'll reduce your fungicide usage and hopefully reduce the potential for resistance occurring in the future. Okay, so when we're talking about major diseases, I generally divide these into greens and teas, fairways, and then roughs. And when you talk about greens and teas, if you break it down into spring, summer, autumn, and winter, you'll identify what your key target diseases are going to be at each stage of that calendar year. In the springtime, for instance, in New Jersey, if you have annual bluegrass, brown ring patch may be a problem. If you have bentgrass, tapeworm patch could be a problem. Dollar spot is sort of cosmopolitan. It can attack, pretty much all the cool season grass species. And fairy ring. Fairy ring has been a growing problem among superintendents in the tri-state region. And there's some very effective strategies for controlling and suppressing fairy ring, which goes into the aspects of product selection, proper selection of fungicide, and proper timing. And as many of you realize, timing is everything in terms of disease control. If you go into the summer, anthracnose can also be a problem spring and summer, just as dollar spot if you have cooler nights. We start getting into hot weather diseases like brown patch, pythium, summer patch. And if you get a lot of heavy rain or you have poor drainage conditions, yellow tuft often shows up in the summertime. These are just some examples. Your course may have different disease issues than these. In the autumn, we often see dollar spot, and dollar spot in the fall or autumn actually is that pitting type of dollar spot. It goes right down to the ground, and we've developed application strategies to control dollar spot, particularly in autumn. There's certain products work particularly well, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on too. And then finally, wintertime, there's always snow molds, pink and gray snow mold, yellow patch. In all honesty, with the warming climate, I think we're less prone to having outbreaks of the snow molds, particularly gray snow mold. You need at least 6 weeks of snow cover for gray snow mold. But you can get gray snow mold as well. But I think we're seeing less and less of an emphasis on snow mold protection as the climate warms. But it still can be important if certain courses historically have very susceptible grasses and tend to get it every year. So this is the approach for greens and teas, identifying your key diseases and specifically when you typically see them occurring. And this is how we start to develop the program from spring into summer, autumn, and winter. Fairways and roughs, the same thing. I usually divide them out. Many people don't spray a lot of roughs, but there are some people that do. Some people spray, say a boom width around in the intermediate rough, just to keep diseases like summer patch in check. But this is the approach. Fairways represent the largest acreage on a golf course. This is where you have the greatest economic impact, but also potentially the greatest environmental impact if you're using products that have very high environmental impact quotients. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So first and foremost, know your major diseases, divided into various parts of the golf course, greens and tees, fairways, and then roughs, and then divide your major diseases into your seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and then winter. The second thing you want to do is to select and apply the most efficacious or most effective fungicides possible. And as I said before, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, once you select the right products, applying them at the proper rates, the proper timing, be it preventive, early curative, and then proper water volumes. And there are a lot of good recommendations out there. The one that Rutgers participates in is called Chemical Control of Turfgrass Diseases. This is updated about every year or so. We're working on the 2021 version now. That should be out hopefully before the growing season starts. And this is, if you Google PPA-1, you'll get the Chemical Control of Turfgrass Diseases. The most current version is a PDF 2020. This is also available on cell phones, and so you can access this in many different formats. This is a concerted effort between University of Kentucky, who started this, Dr. Paul Vincelli, Rutgers, and then University of Wisconsin, Dr. Paul Koch, just recently joined forces with us 2 years ago. So this is sort of a regional type recommendations, but each of your states probably has excellent recommendations as well. One of the nice things about this particular recommendation booklet is that it's, number one, online, so it's accessible, it's updated regularly, and it does provide a ranking for fungicides for each specific diseases for both the single active ingredients as well as the multiple premixes or tank mixes that you might want to use. So I think it's helpful in that perspective. So first and foremost, look at a fungicide recommendation guide such as this one and try to identify for your key diseases which fungicides are most efficacious. So you're to try to build your program. First and foremost, you're going to develop a list of currently labeled products from these guides. You're going to try to identify what the efficiency is or the effectiveness, also called efficacy ratings, would be. For the guide I talked about, the PPA 1, that's on a 1 to 4 scale, 4 being the most effective and 1 being very limited effectiveness. In many cases, there's just not enough data out there from university testing to really give it a rating at all. And in that case, we typically just give it a capital L, which means limited data. And we're constantly trying to get new information reports together. And as these come in, if we have at least 10 good reports from a non-biased source, that's when we give it a 1 to 4 rating. And then look at the strengths of each product. As I said before, no product is outstanding for every disease. And so what you want to do is look at that efficacy ratings, select a couple of products that fall, say, in 3 or the 4 rating scale category, which means they're excellent for the control of your target disease. And then pencil that fungicide down for use, say, in the springtime for your major disease control problems. If you have more than one disease that you're trying to control, say, in the springtime, and the product you've selected only is really effective for one of those diseases, that's where you either need to tank mix the product or you need to look for another product that will give you broad spectrum control for more than one disease at that time of year. So the selection of your products typically would be governed by the number of diseases you have and the products available to you. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're trying to reduce the potential for fungicide resistance. Now, resistance has been a major problem for many diseases in many parts of the country. Golf courses in particular have been prone to resistance issues for diseases like dollar spot, anthracnose, and pythium. And so the key here is to know which diseases are likely to have high potential for resistance, what fungicide chemistries are more prone to resistance. And one of the best ways to identify this would be to look at what's called the Fungicide Resistance Action Committee numbers, or FRAC numbers. These are on every fungicide label. And this tells you which fungicides control a disease in the same biochemical mode of action. And so you want to avoid overuse of these products with a high potential for resistance, rotate or tank mix with different biochemical modes of action. And unless you're a chemist, the only way to know that is to follow the FRAC codes. You want a FRAC code number that's different, and if it's a different FRAC code number, it has a different biochemical mode of action. So it's a pretty simple approach that they put together, and it's big block letters on every fungicide label. We'll talk about fungicide resistance in a little bit, but I just wanted to just bring that up as an important thing to think about. So this is the first approach of how I approach a fungicide program. So if I was going to, golf course X or golf course Y in, say, New Jersey or in South America, the first thing I would do would be to set up, this type of criteria: major diseases, major fungicides available, the strengths of these fungicides, and try to piece or place the fungicides in the beginning, the middle, the end of the year based on which diseases I'm trying to control. Here's an example of a screenshot from the PPA1 manual. And it gives you an idea. This is for dollar spot control. It lists the FRAC code. It lists the efficacy rating 1 to 4, 4 being the best. It lists the interval of application on the label. And as I said, this is only a partial screenshot. There must be probably 2 pages of fungicides that are cleared for use on dollar spot. And just because it's clear for use doesn't mean it's going to be the best. So these efficacy ratings really help. If you're looking at products like chlorothalonil is outstanding, broad spectrum material. M5 means it's a multi-site inhibitor, so that's a very effective product for reducing resistance, or for reducing the potential for fungicide resistance. Products like Emerald, that has a 4 to 3.5. If you look at the footnotes, I can't show them now, but if you look at the footnotes there, it tells you essentially it's 4 at a 21-day interval and 3.5 at a 28-day interval. So, you get into the idea of how long do you want to stretch the applications comes into play. And we'll talk about that in a little bit of time. But referring to, an efficacy table like this can help you to start to draft the potential products you want to use. And then you're going to be tweaking that based on some of the other parameters we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Here's an example of a product where we have, 3, 6, 8 different diseases. And you'll notice in some cases, the products work exceptionally well, like Secure, fluazinem, extremely effective for dollar spot control, extremely effective for brown patch control. So if you expect to have brown patch or dollar spot, that's a good choice for diseases like that. If you have anthracnose, it has a label for anthracnose, and it gives you fair suppression of anthracnose, but that's where, if you have anthracnose with brown patch and dollar spot expected, that's maybe where you want to either tank mix Secure with something or maybe rotate to a different product at that particular time when you think anthracnose is going to be a problem. We have limited data for algae control and for rust and red thread, but that kind of data becomes available as new trials, new fungicide evaluation trials are developed. But this gives you a good idea of how, an excellent product like fluazinem, it gives you exquisite control for certain diseases and then maybe more limited control for others. So it pays to know what the strengths and the weaknesses are of any fungicide on the market. Vallis is another example. It's an SDHI material. It's one of the earlier SDHIs, and it does a very good job for brown patch, excellent job for dollar spot, red thread, and very good, very effective for anthracnose. If you had other diseases, say such as summer patch, it's probably a good idea to tank mix or rotate for that particular fungicide, and that chemistry in general is not, extensively good alone for, say, summer patch control. So it just pays, again, to know strengths, weaknesses, and it'll help you tailor your program to your specific disease problems when they occur. We did talk a little bit about fungicide resistance, and this is a table that I actually modified from Rob Gombiowski, put this table together originally, and it really brings home several main points I want to make about fungicide resistance. Number one, everybody thinks, when I talk about fungicide resistance management, if I were to ask any of you who are on this call, what's the best approach for preventing or delaying fungicide resistance, almost every one of you would say tank mix or alternate fungicides. It's sort of ingrained in our psyche. So you're thinking that the most important thing is fungicide chemistry. Certain fungicides are more prone to resistance than others. It's true. But there's another factor which is just as important as selecting the right fungicide when you're trying to prevent fungicide resistance, and that is the disease itself. Anthracnose, dollar spot, the literature is replete with examples of fungicide resistance issues for those two diseases. So certain diseases are much more prone to resistance than others. If I were dealing with brown patch, I don't know of any resistance for any chemistry on turf right now for brown patch. Whereas for anthracnose and dollar spot, you can see 3 or 4 examples on each of these where we've had resistance issues. So first and foremost, know your fungicide chemistry. Know which fungicide chemistries are more prone to resistance. For example, benzimidazole for anthracnose, that's a FRAC code 1. Any of the benzimidazoles, thiophenate methyl, Benamil, those products would fall in FRAC code 1. We've seen resistance since 2002. You also have resistance on dollar spot to the benzimidazoles. And for the QOIs, for example, we have documented cases of resistance on QOI or strobies for anthracnose. You can also see where cases of gray leaf spot resistance, pythium resistance. And so certain chemistries tend to be more prone, but also, as I said, certain diseases as well. So, Mike, at this point, we're going to go to quiz number 1 to make sure people are paying attention.
Quiz is in process. You guys have 1 minute to complete the quiz. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Yeah, I'm not going to stretch that song out.
I was going to say, how far are you going to go with that?
Yeah, I'm done.
You know, my wife would say, don't quit your day job, right?
Exactly. Thank you. Don't worry, I've got a huge ego. That didn't bother me. We've got 81% submitted. We've still got some stragglers out there, and it's almost at that minute sign. So just submit an answer, even if you don't know it.
I like your quizzes. That it doesn't matter if you get them right or wrong, Mike. That's really intense.
Oh, we're also giving out a participation trophy today too. All right, we're going to be closing up the quiz, and we're going to review it, and hopefully you guys. Well, I don't know if you can see it or not. We had 75 submitted, and the average score was a 99%. So you obviously hit your mark, Dr. Clarke.
Wow, that's incredible.
Absolutely, you're fabulous. Take it away, Dr. Clarke.
Okay, guys. Well, thanks for answering that question. And obviously, you know, we sort of concentrate heavily on certain diseases are important, but you know, it's really important to realize it's not just your fungicide; it's your disease as well in terms of how careful you have to be. So if you're dealing with, say, a patch disease like a summer patch, take-all patch, sure, you have to be careful. There's always a potential for resistance, and certain fungicides are more prone to resistance, but I'd be much more careful with dollar spot, anthracnose, gray leaf spot, pythium when I'm talking about rotating my fungicides. Those are the ones I want to make sure I rotate those on a regular basis. And so it gives you a little more flexibility if you know disease is really important. Now, this is also a table which a number of years ago. It actually lists the fungicides on the left, the left-hand column. It lists under site of action, whether it's a single or multi-site fungicide, and then the fungicide resistance risk on the right. And you can see just by inspection that, you know, if you have a fungicide that attacks the fungus in one site, it's much more prone to resistance. So that's a given. You know, if you have a single site mode of action fungicide, you're more likely to develop resistance than even multi-site fungicide. Examples of multi-site fungicides would be chlorothalonil, mancozeb. These are contact multi-site fungicides. Example of single site mode of action would be benzimidazoles. Single site mode of action, extremely high chance of resistance. And it just so happens, if you look at that previous sheet where I showed you that slide where we had documented cases of resistance, benzimidazoles, phenylamides, strobilurins, DMIs, and even most recently SDHIs, these are the ones we're seeing cases of resistance. So this makes perfect sense. The one thing that is listed here, which I haven't talked about, would be the genetic factor. Now, this is actually the genetic factor in the fungus. When you apply a fungicide, that fungicide binds to the fungus, it binds to the membrane, and often is absorbed into the membrane, into the fungus, and would be toxic to that fungus. Now, whatever fungicide is trying to suppress in the fungus, whatever fungus pathway, for instance, if you have a strobilurin fungicide, I should say, and you're applying it to the turf to control a disease, say like gray leaf spot or anthracnose, well, that strobilurin fungicide is going to be trying to suppress energy production in the fungus. So the energy production pathway, the respiratory pathway, is being blocked by that strobilurin fungus. And therefore, the key is how many genes in the fungus control energy production in the fungus. And in this case, we're dealing with usually monogenic, meaning one gene controls energy production in the fungus. Now, in the case of benzimidazoles, or in the case of DMIs, that's actually when you apply a fungicide, a DMI fungicide, it gets absorbed into the fungus. That's trying to block sterol formation in the fungus. Sterols are needed for membrane permeability. If it doesn't have permeable membranes, it leaks and the fungus dies. So essentially, the DMIs actually control the process of sterol formation, and sterol formation in the fungus is controlled by multiple genes. So it's much harder to get resistance if you have multiple genes involved than mono or single genes. And so the worst case scenario for disease resistance would be benzimidazoles, hand down. It's a single site mode of action. The genetic factor in the fungus is controlled by one gene, and therefore the chance of resistance is very high. The best case scenario would be a product like nitriles, chlorothalonil, multi-site fungicide, controlled. The process in the fungus is controlled by multiple genes, and therefore the chance is extremely low. And chlorothalonil has been out there for decades, and we haven't seen resistance to it. So it doesn't mean you can't get resistance. It just means you have either a low or a moderate or a high probability based on the site of action and your genetic factors. So these are things you need to take into account when any new fungicide comes on the market. Ask two questions: single or multi-site fungicide, and is it, the process you're trying to suppress, that fungicide is trying to suppress, is that process actually controlled by one or multiple genes? And that's important. Okay, so how do you prevent or how do you reduce the potential for resistance? Well, obviously you check your FRAC codes and you try to alternate, to use different rotational strategies, what have you. But first and foremost, even before you get to the fungicide, you got to maximize your cultural practices. Use best management practices to limit disease pressure. Research has shown very clearly that if you follow best management practices, you can tremendously reduce pathogen populations, which means your fungicides work better at lower rates or longer intervals. So maximize your BMPs. Limit your total number of applications. Certain fungicide classes that are more prone to resistance, such as the benzimidazoles, the DMIs, or the SDHI fungicides, really on the label will tell you only apply it a certain amount of time during the growing season. It might be 2, 3, 4 applications in a year. And that doesn't mean 4 applications for your target disease. In other words, if I'm using, say, Exemplar, a good example of a SDHI fungicide. If I want to use it for dollar spot, it doesn't mean 3 to 4 applications of Exemplar for dollar spot. It means 3 or 4 applications of any SDHI for any disease in a growing season. So that is important to know. If you're applying Exemplar or Volista or Xterra Stress Guard, really good SDHIs, if you're applying them for dollar spot control, and then you want to apply that product for, say, brown patch control, the dollar spot fungus is still seeing your brown patch applications. So it's a total number of applications, not only for a specific SDHI in this case, but for all SDHIs in a season. And that's why it's so important to follow the FRAC codes. It tells you what would be included in the SDHI chemistry. Alternate your modes of action, avoid sequential modes of action. This is critically important for high-risk fungicides. Benzimidazoles, phenylamides, you do not want to follow back-to-back, even if it's 2 weeks apart, with the same fungicide chemistry. It really increases the potential for selecting resistant strains of those fungi. So alternate, try to avoid sequential applications, only use a certain number in a growing season, maximize your cultural practices, tank mix, especially tank mixing with, say, a contact fungicide. But the most important thing about tank mixing is know your tank mix partners, what they are good to suppress. Makes no sense for resistance management to tank mix 2 products if only one product controls, say, dollar spot, and that's your target disease. If you're tank mixing for dollar spot control and to reduce resistance to dollar spot, your 2 tank mix partners have to both have activity against that target disease, in this case, dollar spot. So tank mixing, make sure you know what you're putting in the tank. Make sure that you have excellent control for, the target disease when you're tank mixing 2 different materials. Preventive applications for high-risk diseases. If you have a high-risk disease such as anthracnose or dollar spot or gray leaf spot, you do not want to go on a curative basis. You want to hit the disease before it occurs, knock the population of that fungus down on a preventive basis. Avoid late curative and reduced rate applications, particularly if they're shown not to be efficacious or synergistic. Using below label rates is not only illegal in most states, but it also can increase the chances of resistance unless the reduced rates have been shown to be synergistic. Avoid late curative applications is important, particularly diseases like summer patch. If you wait until you see symptoms, the horse is already out of the barn. You want to go in on a preventive basis for summer patch way before the disease shows up visually above ground. And therefore, in most cases, you're talking preventive or early curative if you know what you're doing. Early curative applications are fine if you have your best management practices in place, if you know what you're scouting for, and if you're diligent about scouting, you can save a lot of money and still get excellent control. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Dr. Clarke, quick question.
And then finally, reduce your, yes, sir.
Okay, so as far as the summer patch, can you tag along take all patch along with that spray?
Excuse me. Yes, that's a great question. The key would be to try to time it properly. And take all patch, has soil temperatures usually between 40 and 60 degrees. So we're usually applying take all patch on a preventive basis, Jason, when the grass starts to green, where depending you are in the country, in New Jersey, it might be, say in early April would be the first application. And then say 3 or 4 weeks later, going in with your second application of take all, that second application actually may time very well with your summer patch application, which would be a 65-degree soil temperature. So if you know what you're doing, you can tweak those.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yep. Great question. Appreciate that. Okay, so say you've already selected the right products. So you have the products laid out where you think they should go. The question now is, what's your optimum timing? And Jason sort of gave me sort of a lead into this slide, because there are 3 approaches for timing your fungicides. Number 1, they've been calendar-based, and that's what most people use. You probably apply a lot more fungicide than you need, but you're usually getting pretty good control. Disease predictive models, which would actually allow you to apply the product just before that disease is likely to occur. And some of these models are better than others, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And then threshold-based sprays. And this is early curative sprays based on the first appearance of disease. If you're diligent, you scout your course every day, you know what you're looking for, early curative threshold sprays can work very effective in maintaining excellent control, as well as reducing number of sprays, saving you money. One of the keys here is, though, threshold-based sprays work much better if you have more tolerant cultivars on your golf course, as opposed to really susceptible cultivars such as Anya bluegrass, say Crenshaw, Independence for dollar spot, extremely susceptible. Threshold base sprays there may be a little risky. If you have the newer cultivars, say Declaration, 007, 777, bank grasses, you have a lot more flexibility, a lot less risk of going to an early curative threshold-based spray. So let's talk a little bit about these second 2. Talk about disease predictive models. There's a lot of great models out there, and many of them have been preloaded into many of the weather stations that are so popular on golf courses now. Spring dead spot for Bermuda grass turf. There's a very good predictive model out there based on soil temperatures. We talked a little bit about summer patch. When that soil temperature at 2-inch depth reaches 65 degrees for at least 5 to 7 days running. That may, as Jason alluded to, that may allow you to piggyback your your first summer patch spray, say with your second take-all patch spray, because take-all patch you're probably spraying when the grass greens up, temperature reaches 40 degrees in the soil. Your second spray 3 or 4 weeks later may time very well with your first summer patch spray. So that's where you want to look for efficiencies of reducing the amount of fungicide you want to be using. Try to piggyback these whenever possible. A lot of you I know have had fairy ring issues. Some excellent work done at North Carolina State University by Lee Miller and Lane Treadway when Lane was at NC State showed clearly that timing DMI fungicides or QOI fungicides when the 5-day average soil temperatures reach 65 degrees is an excellent way to reduce or improve control for fairy ring, reduce your fungicide usage. So rather than spray 3 or 4 applications of a fungicide throughout the season for fairy ring control, initiating that when that fairy ring predictive model predicts disease development right at 55-degree 5-day average soil temperature has given us excellent control with 1 or in some cases 2 applications of a DMI spaced about 3 weeks apart in the springtime. Using some really excellent new predictive models for the foliar diseases. The previous slide was root diseases or the thatch diseases. These would be foliar diseases, dollar spot. Smith-Kearns model developed in 2018, and we've tested this for probably about 5 or 6 years now. It's a 5-day rolling average of air temperatures and relative humidity. It gives you a risk index. So at a 20% risk index for susceptible varieties like annual bluegrass, Crenshaw, Independence, it works very well by timing your fungicides just when the disease is likely to develop, and that model predicts that very well. We're currently modifying this. In fact, the GCSA and the Golf Course Superintendents Association of New Jersey is actually supporting this work, as is NJTA, to help identify how we can tweak this dollar spot model for the more tolerant grasses to save even more fungicide usage. And so we're working on modifications right now. Brown patch model developed by Schumann and Lee Burpee and myself back in '94, and then subsequently revisited by Jernoden and Mike Fidanza on perennial ryegrass. We did ours on bent grasses, showed clearly that you could time your fungicides very effectively for brown patch control based on relative humidity, air temperature, minimum air temperature above 59 degrees, and then as little as 1/10 of an inch of rain within a 36-hour period. So these are models which are very specific to certain diseases. And if that's your main target disease, rather than going on a calendar basis, you can use some of these models to time them out. And the same thing goes for Pythium. There are several good Pythium models out there. The 0150 rule, and then some models developed by Hall and some others can allow you to time your fungicide applications when the weather conditions are most conducive to Pythium. So that's the use of predictive models. Timing your fungicides based on when the model predicts the disease is going to develop within the next day or two. So it's really just a very late preventive application. And then there's threshold applications. Anybody heard me give my anthracnose presentation? I'm sure many of you have. This is usually my last slide, and it shows the benefits of following best management practices and timing your fungicides when the thresholds are met. In other words, these are early curative applications when you just see disease. And this is timed based on when you see the disease, dependent on what your cultural practices are. For instance, if you have low mowing height and low nitrogen, in this case, you can see this would be a non-best management practice. We're applying 9 applications for the control of anthracnose. If we raise the mowing height but still keep low nitrogen, we're getting still 9 applications to get adequate control. This is, again, on an early curative threshold basis. If, on the other hand, we switch to a high nitrogen, which is a BMP, but still have low mowing heights, we have to apply 5 applications. But if we go the full route, full BMP, high nitrogen, high mowing, we only needed 2 applications of good anthracnose fungicide to control this disease 3 years in a row. So you can, in fact, dramatically reduce your fungicide applications if you're scouting early curative, but if you have best management practices in place, it's going to be much more effective. The last thing I want to talk about along those lines is water volume, and water volume is important. I would say this, general rule of thumb, for foliar diseases, you need at least 1 gallon of water per 1,000 square feet. On greens, it's a small area. You don't have to tank up that much. In most cases, under high pressure, I think 2 gallons will work a little bit better, but 1 gallon will get you by if you need to. Under no circumstances will going in less than 1 gallon of water per 1,000 work very well. And it's often you see interactions not only with the water volume, but also with the nozzle tips, the nozzle types. Air induction nozzles, the red, extended range nozzles, the green on the left graph shows you clearly that they can be more effective even at a low water volume. If you increase it to 2 gallons, you improve your control with all the nozzle types. And so the key here would be selecting at least 1 gallon per 1,000 on fairways, at least 2 gallons of water per 1,000 on greens, and making sure that you're using for foliar diseases your air induction nozzles, your extended range nozzles as good examples. If you have root diseases, going with the old Delvan nozzles or the large droplet nozzles like Turbo T-Jets can also help you control the root diseases effectively too. Okay, so basically again, proper fungicide selection, optimum timing, proper nozzle type, proper application strategies such as water volume are really important. And the key would be, doing all this on top of following best management practices to optimize your control, get the greatest reduction in the pathogen population, and reduce the potential for fungicide resistance. This brings us to question number 2, Mike. How quickly time flies.
Yes, indeed, sir. Launching quiz number 2.
Very good.
I'll get better. Next time I'll get it to roll right away.
Oh, I thought you were playing this yourself.
On his kazoo.
We've got 80% submitted. I will keep playing this annoying music until everyone submits.
Oh boy.
And we're going to close up the quiz now. And we're going to review it and what type of practices should be followed to reduce turf disease and the lower potential for fungicide resistance. The answer was C, best management practices. And this is perfect because I just realized, Dr. Clarke, I left correct answer in parentheses in the answer.
So what percentage did they get right, Mike?
Well, they all got it right because, or 97% got it right. Somebody still got it wrong, even though correct answers was actually in the answer form.
Well, I appreciate that. So I'm glad everybody did well on that. And again, this shows the importance of best management practices. Mike, you're not going to give me my exams in my class, I'll tell you that much. Okay. Let me spend the last couple of minutes we have just bring it together. So we talked about proper fungicide selection. We talked about tank mixing alternating products, using products that control more than one disease when needed, timing these at the right time of year. This all goes into your program. And just to show you the importance of fungicide selection in terms of and coupled with best management practices. I've shown this before, but it really brings home the point. And if you look at combining best management practices, such as mowing heights, nitrogen fertility, top dressing, The one on the left, like 0.09 inches, would be a non-BMP. An eighth of an inch would be BMP. 2 pounds of nitrogen, non-BMP, 4 pounds of BMP. Again, this is for anthracnose control. Same thing with top dressing. Low rate non-BMP, high rate BMP. We put these together. Our studies have clearly shown that you can dramatically reduce the amount of fungicide without fungicides, and then when you add fungicides, you dramatically improve your level of control. So it's a two-step process. Follow your BMPs, and then utilize your fungicides properly. It's a good team effort. This won't show a lot of graphs, but this one I've shown before. Where do you get the greatest amount of anthracnose? From 0 to 80. That'd be the top one, would be non-BMPs. Low nitrogen, low mowing height, low sand, 70% disease without any fungicide. If you want to suppress the disease a little bit, go full BMPs. High nitrogen, high mowing, high sand, 10% disease. So the key here is following best management practices to reduce your pathogen populations, and in doing so, dramatically reduce the amount of fungicides you need to use, and more importantly, make the fungicides work even better. If you go from the top line, the red line, non-BMP, say you add in, you want to add in a little bit of sand or raise your mowing height, you reduce the disease. If you want to do both, you reduce it even more. But if you really want to reduce it, you would definitely enhance your nitrogen fertility. Enhance your spoon feeding dramatically reduces the amount of anthracnose. So following best management practices reduces the pathogen populations and allows the fungicides to work even better. This brings me to sort of the end. And the presentation up to this point has all been geared to selecting the right fungicide, applying the right fungicide the right way, at the right rate, at the right time, in the right amount of water, and timing at the right, the right time of year. The key, though, is once you develop that program, you're looking at your sheet of paper, and you're pretty proud of yourself, and you say, man, this looks like a great plan. It's efficacious. I can afford it. Let's go. Well, you want to take one step back before you do that. And you want to say, okay, it's a great plan, but, is it environmentally friendly? And to look at that, you need to look at something which called, and there are other ways of looking at it. There are other approaches, but one approach that we use that Cornell developed is called the Environmental Impact Quotient. And it's the formula created to provide turf managers, in this case, with data regarding the environmental and the health impacts of their pesticide options to make better informed decisions regarding the pesticide selection. This was featured in what it was called "What Type of Impact Am I Making on the Environment?" And this was a Met GCSA article back in May-June issue of 2018. I encourage you to look at that. It's a really good article, but it's all about environmental impact quotient. So remember, again, you're talking about the impact that your fungicides have on the environmental and health impacts on your course. So with that, we're all ready to quiz number 3. Are you there, Mike?
We have launched quiz 3 without the music this time.
I like the music. I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Dr. Clarke, I got a couple questions from the audience, just to let you know.
Okay. Do you want to handle them after this quiz question, or?
It's up to you. I don't know how much more you got.
I only have a couple more slides, so.
All right. Well, let's get through the slides and then we can backtrack to the questions.
Okay.
We're at 75%, and you got 15 seconds, folks, on delay. Let's get those answers in.
You're a slave driver, Mike. Whoa.
Yeah. Got to keep moving. Got to keep rolling.
I like the music, though. That was pretty good. Although Tina would probably say she wanted Bon Jovi, so.
She mentioned that already.
Yeah.
I couldn't pay the royalty fees for that. All right, we're closing up the quiz. Let's do a quick review of it. What formula was created to provide managers with data regarding the environmental and health impacts of a pesticide. The choices were environmental impact quotient, estimated withholding tax, pesticide reduction quotient, or health benefits ratio, and the correct is environmental impact quotient. Yay to everyone. There was 96% got it right.
Right. I threw in B. I thought you're all doing your taxes, so estimated withholding seemed to make sense. I don't get out much. You can tell I have fun in strange ways. So what can I say? Okay.
All right, you've got the con.
Let's just finish up then. And so really, if you're trying to determine whether what you have written down on paper for your program really is environmentally friendly, you can go to just Google environmental impact quotient, and you'll come to the Cornell website, the Cornell Cal's website, and that's what you'll see. You'll see they have an article. You can actually a little introduction and description of EIQ. If you have hard time sleeping at night, check that article out. It's great bedtime reading. But what you want to do is go to the environmental impact calculator on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, click on that link, and this is what you'll get. And it'll bring you to the calculator, and it's a calculator for field use environmental impact quotient, and you just type in a fungicide. In this case, I chose propiconazole. Propiconazole for the product I was using was a 14.3% AI, so I typed that in. I want to use 2 fluid ounces since I was trying to control summer patch, so I wanted to go in with 2 fluid ounces per 1,000 square feet, and I just click enter, and this is what I get. I get the response, and the response I get for the active ingredient, I check to make sure that the data was right, and it is. The reference value for the environmental impact quotient value for the active ingredient is 31.6. And the field use EIQ is 24.6. So not that high, and I'm pretty happy with it. If I want to go to another product, say such as Iperdown, or in this case, let's just pick another one. Before I do that, let's look at, I just happen to use Banner, propiconazole, and you can see the AI EIQ is 31.6. I'm treating 4 acres of greens, and so the total EIQ for that would be 100. Okay. If I wanted to use another product for dollar spot control, and that Banner was for fairy ring in this case, but for dollar spot, my first application I'm using Emerald, and sure enough, I go with a use rate of 0.2 ounces per 1,000, and I get an EIQ of 26.44. I'm applying to 28 acres, and the total EIQ here is 36 for that. So it shows you how this is formulated. And for the year, with all the, and I didn't show you part of the spreadsheet, for a year for this golf course, the total EIQ was over 8,000. Okay. Now, if I want to go in and I want to apply another product, say chlorothalonil, which, tends to have a higher EIQ, it doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It just means that you got to be careful how much you're using it. Alternating. I use 3.2 ounces. It's an 82.5% WDG. I'm using 3.2 fluid ounce or 3.2 dry ounces per 1,000 square feet, and I wound up getting an EIQ active ingredient EIQ of 37, but the field IQ is 269. So does that mean you shouldn't use chlorothalonil? No, it doesn't. What it means is it has a high EIQ, and you use it when you need to use it, when it's the best product, but you're alternating with other products to try to keep the total EIQ down. So good example here, where I'm going in with the same products I had. I'm going in on the 10th of May with Daconil. I'm applying this to the fairways, and it ramps up the EIQ. So your EIQ, went from 8,000 to 16,000 because I'm using repeated applications of a high EIQ material. What I often tell people, though, is going in and timing that chlorophyll application, say for anthracnose control, which it's superb for, is actually a good choice, particularly on greens. But going in and using it every 14 days may not be the best approach for something like that. So it's mixing, rotating, tank mixing, selecting products that will lower your IQ when you can do that without reducing efficacy. And Mike, that's the last question I have here. Quiz question number 4. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I've launched the quiz.
Okay.
Only about 3 quarters submitted.
I wasn't rushing you. I just didn't hear anything. I want to make sure I was still on.
Well, it's very rare that I'm quiet, so I understand your concern.
I get accused of talking to myself all the time, so I want to make sure I wasn't.
We're at 81% submitted so far.
Although when you talk to yourself, no one actually talks back, so
No.
no dissension.
But do you ever have arguments with yourself?
I do not.
Okay. Well, welcome to my world. All right. Just so a few of you know, you have made a note that you were not able to submit answers to the quizzes. And I get that there's some sort of technical glitch on your side. So what I'm going to say to you is if you tried to take the quiz and tried to submit answers and it didn't work, when you email your information over to CC, please include that information. Tried to take quizzes, wasn't able to submit. And that way we have documentation you tried. So let's do a quick review. Are you a member of the NJTA? And the correct answer would be yes, but only 53% answered yes. So that means there's a bunch of you folks out here, or 47 if I did the math right, that are not members. Well, I'm going to let Jason talk to you about that.
When did I become membership chair?
So can I move forward now?
Sure.
Okay. And I did not respond for our last question, so don't blame me. Okay. Although I would encourage you that the NJTA is a great organization to belong to. So finally, let's just summarize what we just talked about. We talked about building an effective program, identifying your major diseases and when they typically occur. Following best management practices is the most important thing you can possibly do to reduce your pathogen populations and increase the potential or reduce the potential for fungicide resistance, but more importantly, make your fungicides work better. Develop a list of currently labeled products that you have available to you. Select the products and identify their strengths and weaknesses of these products. Apply the most efficacious fungicides at the optimum rates, the optimum timings, and the optimum water volumes. Look for the strengths of each product. Select products that are broad spectrum when you have more than one disease to control. If you're tank mixing, make sure the tank mix ingredients are both active. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 ingredients, make sure they're all active for your target disease. Otherwise, your tank mix is really not helping to reduce potential for resistance to that target disease. Rotate your chemistries and select fungicides with low EIQs. Take a great program, make it even better by tweaking it slightly, making sure that you're rotating products with high EIQs, only using those when you need to. Doesn't mean you can't use them. It just means you need to use them strategically when they're most effective selection. And Jason, I'm just going to give up an example here. Last two slides here would be, a typical greens program for a country club in New Jersey called Top Notch Golf Course. There is none. I don't think there's one called that, so I just made that up. But it gives you an example of how I would take a greens program on a 14-day schedule. If I wasn't using threshold sprays, I wasn't using disease predictive models, I was just going with straight 14-day applications. I'm going to rotate my chemistries. I'm going to start with an SDHI, early in the season before dollar spot starts. I'm going to come in later on, 14 days later, with a product like, say, Maxtima, which is one of the new DMIs. I'm going to try to get excellent dollar spot anthracnose control. I'm going in with Volista a little bit later for summer patch suppression and dollar spot control. When I start getting into June, I start getting into brown patch, so I'm hitting Briskway, which happens to be azoxystrobin and a DMI in there. I'm going to be controlling my anthracnose, my dollar spot, my summer patch, my brown patch control. I'm then moving into late June, applying a good Pythium material. Going in later, tank mixing a secure with a firm to broaden my control not only of diseases like dollar spot or brown patch, but also attacking anthracnose with that affirm combination. Again, both secure and affirm, both suppressing anthracnose. July, I'm getting into the heat of the summer. I want to make sure I have good control of Pythium. I'm rotating it though. I had a segue application earlier. I'm going to Banal, and then back to segue or another product for Pythium control. Again, you can see what I'm trying to do. Going into August, the same type of rotation, and then September, I'm away from the heat. I don't have to worry about brown patch. I don't have to worry about summer patch. I'm really concerned about dollar spot. What's often when I like to go into an SDHI, like one of the new ones, like Posterity or Stress Guard, and then going in with Secure late in September, because Secure has been one of our most effective materials for that pitting late season fall dollar spot. And then last but not least, in December, tartan interface is a good, one of our best combinations for pink snow mold control if you're worried about pink snow mold on your golf course. So this is an example of a schedule where we have excellent rotation of different DMI of different frac codes. We make sure we don't use any product more than say 3 times in a growing season. We're alternating, we're tank mixing to improve disease control, and we expect to have more than one disease. And the same thing goes for a fairway program, my last slide. But again, this is on a 21-day schedule. So again, the same type of thing. My concerns here for this program would be dollar spot, brown patch, summer patch, Pythium blight. And so I'm really trying to mix and match products, rotate products, tank mix or pre-mix in the heat of the summer when I'm expecting more than one disease, and then trying to minimize the total number of chemistries I use repeatedly in the growing season. So Jason, with that in mind, I'm going to stop here.
Okay.
If there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But before I do answer the questions, I just want to thank the NJTA for giving me the chance to give this webinar. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to listen.
All right. So we're happy to have you, Doc. First question I have from Sean Reynolds. He wants to know your thoughts on pre-mixed fungicide offerings on the market combining 2, 3, or more active ingredients at low label rates each. Is this a good resistance technique, or could it lead to problems after continual use?
That's a great question. Premixes are very they're nice. They're nice to use because they're easy to use. When they're used for when 2 or more of the active ingredients are effective for your target disease, it often makes a lot of sense to do that. When you have more than one disease you're expecting, it's also a very good approach. And as long as you're using it according to the label rate, in other words, not below label rate, it's a fairly good, effective management tool for resistance prevention. But again, it only depends if you're trying to prevent resistance to, say, dollar spot, fungicide resistance to dollar spot. You better make sure that the active ingredients in that premix are effective against their target disease.
All right, sounds good. All right, second question was from Andrew Aldridge. Would you recommend using a biological fungicide in rotation as a preventative and to reduce resistance?
That's an excellent question, and I appreciate that question. And I think it highlights, and I didn't have time to talk about everything, obviously, but biological controls in general have not been as strong as some of the synthetic fungicides for the control of diseases, but I think there's a place for them. And where I say that is where they can be tank mixed at reduced rates of synthetic fungicides. That's where I think the major strength is, because it gives a different mode of action, obviously. So tank mixing a biological fungicide with a reduced rate of synthetic, as long as they're compatible. Some of them are not. You can set right on the label what they're compatible with. It's allowed us to reduce our use of some synthetic fungicides dramatically, saying using a low label rate and an extended interval with a tank mixed with a with a biological control product has worked very, very effectively. Rotating or alternating will work if the disease pressure is not terribly high, or if you have a surface cultivar which is fairly tolerant of the disease. But if you have a really susceptible cultivar and disease pressure, using a biological control alone often is not going to give you sufficient control. It either has to be tank mixed with other products, or just rotated with good chemistries when you're mixing a biological with a synthetic.
Okay. All right, third question from Daryl Marcinic. He's battled dollar spot well into October the last several years on L93 bent. What product would you choose? What's currently the best choice out there?
Well, Daryl, that's a great question. We've been working. We noticed maybe about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, that the dollar spot in the fall was a little bit different than the dollar spot we're seeing in the spring and the summer. And in fact, we often we'll have resistance issues in the spring and summer with a product like benzimidazoles, and in one of our greens, I can actually get control of full dollar spot with benzimidazole in the fall. So it shows you, I think, the isolates you're getting sometimes in the fall are quite different than the isolates you're getting in the spring and summer. And the key, I think, we started picking up on this, so we started running our individual efficacy trials. We'll run a spring-summer trial, and we'll run a fall trial, completely separate trials. And for best for fall pressure have been products like fluazanam, Secure, or Rotator, very good expression of full dollar spot, the pitting type dollar spot. But again, rotated or tank mixed, if you will. Often rotating is what you do with other chemistries, say an SDHI or a DMI. But utilizing strong suits for full dollar spot and looking at the PPA-1 manual to identify those products.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Hello?
Could you hear me or no?
I can hear you now. You're breaking up a little bit on your audio. All right, I got one more question. What nozzles do you recommend for greens, fairways, and tees? And that's from Joe Sosha.
Okay, greens, fairways, can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit. Your connection, I guess, is getting weak.
Yeah, he is frozen.
Uh-oh, frozen. Oh, he moved a little bit. Dr. Clarke is on the move.
Closer
He's
to
on the
his
move.
And this tour of Dr. Clarke's house has been brought to you by the NJTA.
Our wonderful sponsors.
We still cannot hear you, Doc.
We can't hear you. He's not muted, is he?
Bruce Clarke has been muted. I'm unmuting you.
There you go.
Clarke.
There we go.
I thought you liked me, Jason. Now you're going to mute me. Okay. So in any case, repeat that last question because I moved close to my router.
What are the best nozzles for green tees and fairways? What do you recommend?
Okay, so basically we find air induction nozzles and extended range nozzles, XR nozzles, be effective nozzles for us for foliar disease control, and then for root disease control, extended air induction nozzles are very effective, and any other large droplet nozzles. The key for root diseases would be you want to make sure you have high enough pressure to get it into the base of the plant, so at least 40 psi, and sufficient gallonage to get it down into the base of the plant.
All right. I think that hopefully that answers your question, Joe. Hopefully. Well, Dr. Clarke, I'd like to thank you again for spending about an hour and 15 minutes. I think it was great. I think we've gotten some great information from you, and I'm glad we could get together and you could present it. I think it was a great topic. It's one topic that kind of was dear to my heart because we brought this talk up. We talked about this at a NJTA board meeting one time, and he's drastically helped me improve my control of my diseases on my golf course. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. I hope people enjoyed the presentation. I had a great time, but I don't get out much, so it's easy for me to have a good time talking about diseases.
All right. So everyone, we want to thank you for coming. We got some news, up and coming events with the NJTA. We hope to get everybody together in person. It's all dependent on our wonderful virus that's running around the country and the world. So we've got some planned dates already pretty much in stone that we can look forward to. We've got the field days, Forum 1 and 2 in the end of July on the 27th and 28th. This is sort of breaking news. We've moved the Golf Classic due to our current conditions of our global pandemic, and we made a prudent decision to move it to the middle of August. Hopefully we can get more people there, and that's going to be Monday, August 16th. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with too many of our golf guys aerifying greens and fairways and everything else like that. And then we've always got our big end of the year bash at the NJTA Green Expo down in December in Atlantic City. We're still going to move forward and plan to have it in person. And so hopefully that's the biggest event we get together, and we all get together and have a drink and see each other after a long year of being away and being social distant. As a member of the NJTA, we're always looking for good help. If you're interested in becoming a committee member, we've got plenty of openings, whether you're into social media, treasury, secretary. There's so many different committees that make up our board. We're always looking for good people and good help, and people who want to help the cause and help our wonderful industry. So if you have any interest, give CC a call. I'm sure we can put you on a committee that help us out. And finally, we'd like to thank all our sponsors once again. It's without our sponsors that helps put this on and support the NJTA and Rutgers, and we can't thank enough of all their generosity and help through the years and times. So with that, I hope you guys have a great day, and
I think you can